Alright guys, welcome to video 6. This is going to be over user authentication. This is going to be a two-part series. So video 7 will be the second half. In this one we'll look at setting up user profiles, dealing with creating the model, tweaking out your settings to tell Django you have a user profile. We'll look at forms and creating a registration form. And then in video 7, I'll walk you through how to authenticate users, deal with permission sets, stuff like that. So inside of Django's models, you can actually declare a model as a user profile, which will hook it into a bunch of internal user-based functions. So the first thing we're going to do for that is we're going to start a new app. So we're going to run manage.py start app. And we're going to call our members on our website drinkers. So I'm going to call this drinker app. So we'll go into drinker and you can see it's just like every other app, pretty standard. So we'll look at the models first. Okay, so we'll need to be able to access the user objects. So we're going to have to go from Django.contrib.auth.models import user, and that's all built into the framework. It comes with it straight out of the box. So here we're going to do a class called drinker, and this could be models.model. And the first thing we're going to do is do a user equals models.one to one field, and we're going to have that linked to a user so that every user account that gets created will be associated with one of the built-in Django user objects, and that's what's going to actually provide the authentication for us. And then we get to define out anything we want in a model about a user. So we can say something like birthday equals models.date field. We could say something like name equals models.char field. We'll do max length equals let's do 100. We can add anything we want in here, so we can do we can add an image if we want to give all our users avatars, whatever. I'll leave that up to you guys. And as always, we have to do a Unicode version of the self. So we're going to return self.name, which is different than the username, which is actually provided by the user object. Okay, so in our models, when we create a user profile, we have to set up some callbacks that'll handle with creating this user object for us. And so you can read all about that if you go to the djangoproject.com. There's this authentication section here. And this will tell you how all this stuff works, like what you need to have in your settings file to provide authentication, all the things that are provided by the user object. And specifically what we're going to look at is this auth profile module and all the things that are associated with it. So if you guys want some more background, you can come check this out. But for now, what we have to do, this is going to create our user object to attach to our drinker object. So we have to def a function here. So I'm going to call this create drinker user callback, and that's going to take a sender, instance, and a pointer to kwargs. And what it's going to have is drinker new, and you can read about how this works. This returns true or false based on the return from drinker.objects.get or create. So it'll return true if it's created and false if it already exists. And we're gonna have, let's say user equals instance. And then down here we're going to hook into the post save .connect, which you can also read about on the website. And so we're going to send that over to create drinker user callback, and that's going to hook into the user object. So anytime the user object's created, we register this post save for users, and it'll call this function. Alright, so now we've got a decently functioning model for a user profile. So back in our settings, the first thing you need to do is go into your installed apps, and in order for authentication to work, you have to have these two lines, which come installed out of the box. That's nice, but content types and auth. And so these provide a get_profile method that you can run against a request that will return the user object of whoever's requesting the page, which makes it really simple for us to deal with stuff. So here we're going to add drinker to our installed apps, and we're going to add another little piece of configuration. This one is going to provide our get profile method, and so it's going to be auth profile module, and we're going to set that equal to drinker.drinker. And so this just tells Django that this drinker object is going to provide a profile for authentication to the Django backend. So let's go ahead and write that. We're going to have to sync the database because we just installed a new app with a new model. And post save is not defined. Alright, so let's go take a look. Okay, so post save is actually provided from one of the internal packages called signals. So we have to go from django.db.models.signals, import post save. And you can read about how that works in the Django documentation. So now we're going to sync the database again. And this time it actually created the table. Okay. Alright, so now that we have our drinker model all created, we're just going to register it with the admin real quick. So we're going to vim admin.py. We're going to say from django.contrib import admin, and we're going to say from drinker.models import drinker, and we're just going to do an admin.site.register drinker. Alright, so we'll write that and we'll restart the web server. So you can see now over here there's no drinker, but when we refresh now, we now have drinkers. So you can click on it, there's none in there yet. You can add a drinker, and you can see it's got the fields from our model. For the user, it's got a drop down, or you can hit the plus arrow and create a new user. But instead of creating all of our users from the admin, we're going to build a registration form for users to be able to register themselves. So the first thing we're going to do is actually create that form for users to fill out. So we're going to do that by starting a file called forms.py. So we have a bunch of imports to do here. From Django, import forms. It's going to provide a bunch of form stuff for us. We want to be able to get to the user objects, so we're going to say from django.contrib.auth.models import user. We're going to extend model form, so we're going to say from django.forms import model form, and that's going to provide us the ability to just pass a model to the form, and Django will automatically create a form out of the fields in the model. So model form's pretty cool for cutting corners. From drinker.models, we're going to import drinker because we want to be able to access that object as well. So we're going to create a class called registration form, and that's going to extend model form. So in here we're going to create all the user registration stuff manually. We don't want to use the built-in Django stuff from that. So we're going to say username equals forms.char field, and we're going to say label equals Unicode string called user name. Then we're going to do email is forms.email field. And Django will automatically check that the email address is valid when the form validates for us. So we don't have to do any extra work there. And that's going to be a Unicode string for the label. I'm just going to say email address. And then we're going to create a password form. So this is where it gets a little different. So it's going to be a standard form.char field. But in here, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to give it a label. It's going to be a Unicode string, password. But then we're going to use a built-in widget, and we're going to use the forms.password input widget as provided by Django. And we're going to set render value to false. That way it'll make a password field, and when you type things in, it'll hide it. And we're going to do a password 1. It's going to be the same thing, except for in this one, the label is going to be verify password. So I'll have them type it in 2 times. And we're going to say widget equals forms.password input. That's going to be render value equals false. Alright, so now we need to define some class meta information. And this is where the power of the model form comes in. We say model equals drinker. So it's automatically going to take this model, create a form directly out of all the fields in the model. But since we've gone ahead and done all the user stuff ourselves, we're going to tell it exclude equals the user field from the drinker model so that it doesn't create these form fields for us. Then what we're going to do is we're going to define some clean functions, and these are going to clean different members of the field. So when you call form.isValid, it'll automatically see if you've created a clean method for the members of the form. So we're going to start with clean username, and as long as you just name it, you just put clean underscore and then whatever the variable name is, it'll automatically call this for each variable when you call form.isValid, which we'll do a little later in the view. So this is going to take itself, and we're going to say username equals self.cleanedData username. So this is the data that's coming back from the form after you've posted it to the view. It's going to get whatever was in username and put it into a variable called username that we can access locally. So then we're going to say try user.objects.get username equals username. So this is going to try and get any user object that already has the username that's been submitted in the form. And so we're going to say accept, and this is going to be user.does.not.exist, and this is what we're hoping to hit. So we'll return the username if you get this error trying to get a user with the username that you've already submitted. We're going to say it's okay, go ahead and use the username. Otherwise, we're going to raise forms.validation error that username is already taken, please select another. So just give a little message there and tell them, hey, gotta pick something else. So then the next one we're going to do is clean password. That's going to again extend itself. So we're going to say password equals self.cleanedData password. So we're going to get what came out of the post, and we're going to say password 1 equals self.cleanedData password 1. Down here, we're going to say if password does not equal password 1, we're going to raise forms.validation error. The passwords did not match. please try again. And then we're going to say, if not, we can just return password to use as the password. Everything went well. So that's pretty much our intro to forms there. This one's a little more complex than most of them because we did a whole custom setup here. Usually when you're using model forms, you just need this class meta, and you just give it the model, and then you can exclude whatever fields you want. And that'll usually give you the whole form that you need, unless you want to do anything specific like check and see if a user already exists with that username, compare passwords, stuff like that. But for the most part, forms are actually really simple to do in Django, which is really nice for us. So the next thing that we're going to have to do now is go into our views. Don't worry about that error. So in our view, we've got to do some imports here from Django.http import HTTP response redirect. We're going to do from Django.shortcuts import render to response. We're going to say from Django.template import request context, and now from our forms, which is in drinker.forms import registration form that we just created. So we're going to start with a view method called drinker registration, and that's going to take a request, and we're going to say if request.user.is authenticated, and if they are, we're going to return an HTTP response redirect to /profile. So what this is going to do is if somebody hits this registration and they're already logged in, we're going to send them to profile because we don't want them to be able to register if they're already logged in, they're already registered. Okay, so if they're not already registered, we're going to check if request.method is post. So if they're submitting the form, for now we're just going to pass, and we'll come back and fill all of that in. But we want to get the form up and running first. So here we're going to say user is not submitting the form, show them a blank registration form. Alright, so we're going to say form equals, and we're just going to use this form here. So we're going to say registration form, and then we're going to add that to our context, call it form, and we're just going to return a render to response, and we're going to call this register.html. We'll go make that template in a second here, where the context instance is equal to the request context of the request. Okay, so now we have to make this register.html template, and then we have to build the hook for this in our URLs, and we should be good to at least display the form. So let's go look at making register.html. Okay, so now we're going to go back to our templates, and we're going to do register.html, and so this is going to extends base.html. So we're going to inherit our base template. We're going to say block content because we want to put that inside the content block from base, and we're going to say end block, and then here we pass the form variable, the whole form, in a variable called form. So we're just going to print that out for now, see what that looks like. So back in our drinker, in our view, this is the name of the view here, so I'm going to copy that. We're going to look at our URLs, and in our URLs we're going to say, let's do register, so register will be the URL. That's going to call drinker.views.paste. So drinker registration is going to get called from /register. Alright, so let's restart the web server now. Okay, so back over here, if we go to /register, okay, so you can see here what happened in our drinker views. So you can see this check right here. It's saying if request.user is authenticated, redirect to /profile. And so I'm actually still logged in over here. So you can see that it actually sent me to /profile when I tried to go to /register. So I'm going to log out of this. Now I'm going to try to go to /register again. And there you go. You've got the form just dumping on the page, so you can see the 2 password fields, hide the input. So there's our form. Then we just have to post it, deal with the post, and we can create users. So let me show you guys a little bit more of what we can do with this template now. So in this template you've got form. Django also provides an as form.as_p, which will, if we look at the actual HTML that this form is generating, so you can see it just drops labels and inputs inside of, it doesn't even wrap them in a div. That page container comes from our base. So now that we've changed it to form as p,
You've got freaking mail.
you can see here it wraps each label and input inside of a P. There's a couple other ways that you can have Django automatically display the form, but I'm pretty big on custom forms, so I don't like to use too much of the built-in stuff. But we'll get to that a little bit later. This is just for getting the basic idea of how it works up and running. So now we have a whole form that people can post to. Check out the next video. In video 7 we'll actually show how to register users, how to log them in, how to log them out, how to deal with resetting passwords, things like that. So thanks for watching.